In some airports, you have to go through 14 different checkpoints before you even get on your plane. So how do you start reducing all of those checkpoints? And oftentimes that can be done through a verifiable credential, that you can reduce the travel flow down to maybe 3 or 4. And that's significant not only for the traveler, but for the airlines, airports, the governments involved.
Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 19. Today I have with me Indicio CEO Heather Dahl and CTO Ken Ebert. We're going to chat about a little thing called digital trust. Heather, Ken, thanks for your time. Why don't we start with some intros, and maybe you can give us a quickie overview of what Indicio is all about.
Sure, I'm Heather Dahl. I'm CEO, one of the co-founders of Indicio with Ken. We started Indicio because we saw some challenges in this space when it came to adopting decentralized identity solutions, which is really focused on building that digital trust. And how do you do that in this Web 3.0 world that we're now beginning to live in? And so that's why we created Indicio. We said to companies, bring your blockers, whatever your challenges are in moving to decentralized identity, we are here to help.
And Ken?
I am the CTO and one of the co-founders at Indicio. I've been involved in the decentralized identity space for a number of years now, working with the W3C on the data model for verifiable credentials and the DID specification, also working at Hyperledger to improve the quality and performance of the underlying tech stack. My focus is on the technology side and making sure that all the pieces and parts are there to build complete solutions for our customers and community, and really am excited about the accelerating adoption of verifiable credentials.
Awesome. So Indicio just launched a new product called Proven, but before we get into that, why don't we zoom out a little bit? Why do we need this new framework for digital trust in the first place? What are some of the core problems with how digital trust works today?
I think when you look at the challenges we have on data and how it's being used, I'll call it faux consent mechanisms, the challenge that you can't even access some of your own data without actually having to have permission for purposes outside of the intended. For instance, like health records, you may want your health record from a physician or office for another purpose, but you have to go and it's really hard to get a hold of those. Or providing proof that maybe you had a job with an entity, but you can't share that digitally. I think any of us who've gone through the challenges of opening accounts or buying things online see that. And as a result, fraud continues to ramp up and increase. But the challenge is when you look from a security side, there comes a point when you just can't throw more and more money at more solutions. We have to look at a different way of how we architect and create our digital experiences. And that's where Ken has been instrumental with Indicio in looking at that new vision.
I think that part of the challenge is the multiple different versions of me that exist. I have probably about 100 accounts online. All of them have slightly different information about me, not intentionally, but they just tend to diverge. Each of them are in silos themselves and can't share the data across between the different platforms. Other challenges involve things like bringing together communities that don't normally interact. And one of the use cases that we've worked on, bringing healthcare together with travel and governments, is an interesting use case where they don't have a good integration mechanism. And by providing the data to the person can bridge the gap using standard protocols and very secure methods for sharing the data without doing a direct integration that's very costly and time consuming to accomplish. And infeasible for an airline to integrate with all 5,000 hospitals in the United States. It's just not going to happen. And so providing a mechanism where the person can bridge the gap using standard protocols and secure methodologies is a much better mechanism.
And what Indicio does, as I said, we're really out there trying to seed the ecosystem for success. And the work Ken described is what we had worked with CETA and the government of Aruba on doing. And there's a lot of information out there about that. The most important part was CETA also saw the value in helping lift the entire community up, and they contributed that code that has become Linux Foundation Public Health's Cardia project. And Ken's one of the co-chairs. And I always say Cardia is a hidden gem masterclass in verifiable credentials because while the use case is healthcare specific, the underlying foundation and how it was built can be used to support all kinds of use cases, but you get to see how a group with multiple stakeholders came together to collaborate and make it happen.
So it sounds like there's all these fragmented systems. Our data's in these sort of redundant silos. The systems aren't talking to each other, right? And how you've sort of hinted at it, but how exactly is in Indicio and with products like Proven addressing those core issues?
There's a number of core issues that are being addressed. One of them is interoperability of the technology, and that can be accomplished with some of the code that we've worked on that's open source and readily shareable so that anybody can take advantage of it. The other focuses on protocols. Protocols and standards for how to interchange the data make a good foundation for lots of different players to participate and to be able to interact efficiently and securely. Another aspect that Indicio gets involved with is kind of the non-technical bits of it that are to enable anybody to go from zero knowledge about any of this stuff to being able to deploy it. And I think, Heather, you want to talk a little bit about some of the non-technical parts?
Right. So you can have a terrific technology, the technical components, and that's what Proven offers is it levels the playing field for everyone. It provides an open source and open standards-based issuer, holder, verifier, mediator agent. It supports, it offers schema, cred-def, and it supports any Hyperledger ND-based network, whether that's the Indicio network or others, or a company or a consortium wants to build their own private network. In fact, we'll help with that. But the challenge here is you can have the best technology you can have Proven, but success comes with how do you communicate it? How do you write the policy governance? How do you communicate that with legal? How do you sell it, right? The business development. What's the deck that your sales teams goes out? How do you teach your partners who you want to have data verification with? How do you teach your entire team what you're doing? And it's all of that that Indicio also offers. And so with organizations and companies and consortiums that come to us, they may develop their custom use case, they may roll out Proven in the way that they see solving problems, but then it's the press release, right? It's the social media, it's the we need to meet with our partner's legal team, and that's where Indicio also kicks in, because we have a bench of experts who have deep experience in decentralized identity and all of these business side areas that we can support to make sure that the entire project is a success, not just technically, but also from full-scale deployment.
I think it's critical that there are some pieces that are technology-based and people-based. When you talk about governance, how do you know who you're going to trust in an ecosystem? And that's one that the decisions need to be made in a trust framework to say who are the trusted parties. Then how do you communicate that to the software so that the software can help people know how to work with that? Machine-readable governance helps bridge that gap. It's something that each ecosystem can publish on their own. It's downloadable so that if they're ever offline or something like that, that the decisions can still be made. The software can interpret that machine-readable governance to make a decision about, yes, that's a trusted issuer. Yes, that's a schema with the right kind of data in it. And then they can go through the cryptography and all the cool techie parts of it to make sure that the data hasn't been tampered with and it really is from that issuer. And then a business decision can be made. But all of this weaves the technology together with the people type decisions that need to be there in order to have a true trust take place in that ecosystem.
And one of the things that Ken just described that we really love to do is we have a team that focuses on the business logic and how it integrates with the technology. And then how does that translate to the UX and UI of the experience? And so that team sits and works with the technical and business sides of our customers to make sure that that happens, because we've seen a lot of areas where the challenge and adoption was actually the UI UX of the experience and how that was communicated and the instructions written on a screen and whether you swipe or tap here. And so that's been fascinating to see how these teams have been able to advance what was, I think, considered standard de facto UI of these wallets, of the agents, and seeing how they've moved to a more sophisticated business logic approach that's easier for consumers to adopt.
All of that certainly rings true from the global ID perspective, right? This is still a very nascent space. A lot is undefined, and with a firm like Indicio at the forefront of that frontier, there's a lot of clarity that your team can help bring to the ecosystem. You have been described as this market leader in trusted digital ecosystems. Like how would you define, what exactly is that, a trusted digital ecosystem?
A trusted digital ecosystem allows parties to exchange authentic, verified data amongst each other, and to do so without direct integration. So oftentimes where we start is we start simple. What information needs to be exchanged between two parties without a direct integration? Very basic. Is it proof that an employee works at a facility and has received a flu vaccine in order to enter a laboratory? And so we start simple where the issuer, the holder, and the verifier, all the same company, right? And so once we stand up that initial use case and the initial components, or help adjust the components that a company may already have, we're able to start driving that. And that's where Ken and his team really gets in, is how do you start simple and scale?
Most of these solutions can be modeled with very simple number of components. You need at least three: somebody to issue, somebody to hold, and somebody to verify. And once you've got that up and running, you can start to see the potential for increasing the number of verifiers and bringing other people in. Or, hey, I have a new credential type or a new use case that I want to implement. But if you can pick out just one and focus on that in the beginning, that helps get a core of something functional. And then you can build on top of that, modify it, enhance it, improve its scalability, add new cool features to it. But that's where it all starts, and in an approach that doesn't require rip and replace. How do you integrate that with your existing KYC process to provide an identity credential for a financial institution? If you can make it tailor alongside of what's already there and be additive and provide value, it's a lot easier to get the budget to do that than it is to say, we're going to replace your entire identity system. And that's usually a non-starter for most companies because it's so painful. But if you can make it incremental and start small and add to it, then it adds value and it provides immediate benefits, and then can grow on top of that.
Where we see companies starting, I call it the conference room ecosystem, where they basically have their use case of what information they want to issue, who wants to hold it, and then how they verify it. And they have a meeting and they throw the working technology on the table and show right there, we're issuing a credential off our enterprise agent, the holder's receiving it right there in the conference room with devices, and then we verified it. And that conference room ecosystem demo it's amazing to see how fast it scales, because the other stakeholders in the room, the light goes off and like, okay, can we use this for all kinds of use cases? And then the challenge becomes, how do you manage your priorities in developing?
So you've mentioned this term quite a few times now, the verifiable credential, the credentials you're talking about. It's obviously one of the core underpinnings of your framework. Can you just give a quick explanation as to what a verifiable credential is, and why it is such a big deal?
So I'll take it from the high level. As a verifiable credential is information that is held by the holder. It is secured. It is provided by the holder. The holder can be a person. It can be a device. It can be an organization. It can be whatever you want that holder to be, and it's the information associated with it. And that information is contained and provided by the holder with consent to a verifier, can take the next level down of technically what a credential is.
That's the level that's the most important, because that's where the values derive. All the stuff underneath the technology part, that's really cool and interesting. And if you're a cryptographer, it's really fun to look at how it's all put together. But basically, an issuer takes a set of fields and puts them in a structure, and then signs them using their private key, their public keys on a ledger, so that anybody can verify that they really signed it. And then after they sign it, they give that packet of that signed credential, that verifiable credential. The reason it's called verifiable is because you can go back to the ledger, pick up their public key, and prove that they actually signed it. But once it's given to the holder has that packet of information, and they can determine who they want to share it with. When they do that sharing, they can do it in a zero knowledge proof methodology, which means that they can selectively disclose different fields. So if I have 5 fields and I only want to share these 2, I can choose to not reveal the others. I can do things like predicate proofs and say, my age is over 21, I can rent a car without giving them my birth date. You can do things like set membership. So is my state one of the 50 states in the United States? Those types of things. That allows for a very secure way to reveal that information to the verifier in a way that they can use cryptography to prove that I haven't tampered with the fields, I haven't changed my age from, say, 18 to 22. Do I look 22? They can tell that I haven't tampered with the data because the cryptography will catch it if I do. And they can go back to the ledger to pick up the schema to say, hey, there's supposed to be 5 fields and they look like this. The signature from the verifier matches what's in the credential, and the issuer's DID, or decentralized identifier, is one that I trust. Therefore, I can trust the information that this holder's giving to me. They've transmitted it in a secure way over a secure DIDCOM channel that allows me to have high trust in the data. I can take action on it immediately. And that's a real benefit from the technology side. But all of that underpinning of the technology is there to support the business reasons or the personal reasons that you want to share the data and make it worthwhile. And if you don't address both the technology and the business part of it, then you have a non-starter of a solution. And so that's why we tackle both sides of the equation. We make sure the technology is good and solid and complete, comprehensive. We make sure that the business part of it, business development, marketing, their understanding of how governance works and what needs to be there, all of that has to be there for a successful solution to occur. It's not that complicated if you check all the different boxes around the circle, but that gives you the complete and total picture to have a successful implementation and successful sharing of data that is either, in one case that we worked with, there was about 60% fraud in the data that was being presented without verifiable credentials. When verifiable credentials were introduced, the fraud went to 0, and the reliability of that data increased significantly. And so those are the types of benefits that we're trying to bring to the table to allow governments, businesses, and people to be able to interact more safely and securely.
So all of that sounds great, but especially in the context of this trust triangle you've sort of been referencing, right? The issuers, the verifiers, the holders. There's always going to be this sort of chicken and egg problem, right? In terms of introducing this completely new framework, and then actually building out this ecosystem, onboarding, the verifiers, the issuers, the end users, so that you get those network effects. Where are you seeing traction so far, and what use cases are you targeting in the near term?
The use cases that bring the chicken and the egg at the same time. That's where we see where they are bringing their own issuer, their own data that they actually need to verify themselves. So many organizations have redundant verifications or KYC, where you go to one department, go through the KYC, and then you go to another department at the same company, and guess what? You get to do KYC all over again. So we see a lot of times they are bringing their own issuer and their own verifiers within their own company. And what that does is it allows them to set up a basic ecosystem where they don't have to depend on another external party. They don't have to depend on that external party getting through all the legal wranglings or trying to get their people on board. They're able to set up these ecosystems and issue and verify data that brings immediate value to the organization, oftentimes with cost savings or improved customer experience, because that customer is not having to go through the same process 3 or 4 different times. And so that's where we see it. But once they start setting up their basic ecosystem where the company is its own issuer and verifier, and their holder is oftentimes an employee or an existing customer, they find that their external partners want to get in and benefit from that credential as well once they start learning about it. So oftentimes before a company has fully deployed their own ecosystem and verifying their own information, they have partners knocking on the door wanting to become involved quickly. And then that's when you get at the point that you were talking about, the chicken or the egg, right? You either have partners knocking on the door saying, oh, you can take our credential that we're issuing, or they can say, you have this verified data that actually benefits us because we are your partner. We do provide additional support services or offers to your customer. Let us become involved. Let us stand up a verifier. And that's how they start going from, basically a very simple ecosystem to the entire constellation universe of partner, issuer, and verifiers. So what we say is, don't try to boil the ocean right at the beginning. Just solve one of your own basic, simple problems, and then the chicken and egg will present itself very quickly. And then your challenge will be, how do you manage both and the demand?
I've also, in tragic comedy, seen a number of providers who offer a holder, an agent, and they say, we're just waiting for the rest of the ecosystem to come along. If you do that, you'll be waiting a long time. You may find one of these other ecosystems that's more complete, that's been stood up, that you can then start to participate in. But having all of the components, issuer, holder, verifier, and a network to base it on that's reasonably priced, that gives the comprehensive solution so that you can get started, avoid the whole chicken and egg problem. You can, as Heather said, then grow it beyond that to include partners or other use cases. And that's the key to success, I think.
Are there any projects or ecosystems you're most excited about at the moment?
I think one of our flagship projects has been in the travel and hospitality space with CETA. And the government of Aruba, additional partners involved, as well as that project continues to move forward. And although it started with providing proof of health status during the pandemic, they quickly saw that it could be used to solve other challenges in the travel hospitality space and move towards a more seamless travel experience where you're not having to present your identity multiple times. And we all know from the point of buying a ticket to the point of check-in at hotels and car rentals how many times we have to provide our identity. And the other component is, in some airports, you have to go through 14 different checkpoints before you even get on your plane. So how do you start reducing all of those checkpoints? And oftentimes that can be done through a verifiable credential, that you can reduce the travel flow down to maybe 3 or 4. And that's significant not only for the traveler, but for the airlines, airports, the governments involved. And so we see that particular use case is very exciting CETA won the European Identity and Cloud Conference Verifiable Credential Award a couple months ago. We've won the CRN Social Impact Award from that work. It's something that we've talked about and done multiple discussions over the last few months with CETA and the government of Aruba on how that was done, because once again, as you've said, it's that chicken and egg. It's not just about these particular parties that we work with. It's about the greater vision for others to adopt interoperable technology to also benefit from that growing ecosystem, or from the lessons learned and the approach taken to apply that to their own industry or use cases as well. Ken, what are you excited about?
I'm particularly excited about the financial industry and being able to do simpler and more beneficial KYC work so that the customers and their interaction with the financial institutions is eased, so that account opening is faster, quicker, more reliable, and compliant with the KYC and AML type of laws. Also to improve simple things like customer service. If I don't like having to do the 20 questions. What's my mother's maiden name? What was my mascot of my high school marching band? Those are questions that I think are painful and get in the way of the interaction that I want to have with the financial institutions. Those types of things are simpler in terms of grand scope. It didn't change the travel industry like the other use case did, but it changes how I interact with my financial institution in a way that's meaningful and far more frequent than I travel around the world. So those are the types of things. I think interactions with within organizations, I think it has potential to affect the way we verify work credentials and things like that as well. So there's a number of really exciting use cases that I think are extremely broad and touch many, many people's lives and start to have an immediate impact on day one.
Well, the other one is also IoT and devices. That's also some exciting work that we see on the spatial web. And as we move to a world where you have devices working on their own or reporting back data, how do you know that that's the device you want? How do you know that the data that's coming in is authentic from that device? I think that's some early pioneering work that we've been involved in, because IoT has been one that's kind of followed the human-centric use cases, but we are seeing more and more IoT work being done, and it's fascinating.
In terms of actual numbers, I think the IoT devices will outnumber us significantly, and they don't usually have an advocate standing up for IoT devices' rights and privacy protection and so forth, but they do have a significant presence, and I think that as IoT devices are one use case we worked on is collecting emissions data from for monitoring carbon dioxide and other types of emissions. And that type of data has different privacy concerns. It still has some privacy that's related around it that might be pertinent to a company, but the collecting and aggregating of that data in a reliable way using verifiable credentials is another thing that I find fascinating.
So the machines are getting digital identities, you're
Yes,
saying?
they are.
Yes.
They already have digital identities. They're just not very good ones. This would give them a more secure way and a way to transmit their data in a way that is more secure and that is trustworthy and less hackable.
Indicio has been deeply engaged with governments, institutions, companies, collaborative initiatives like Hyperledger. You've talked about lessons learned. What are sort of the major challenges toward mainstream adoption?
The challenges have been where to start. We see organizations who feel like, like you say, chicken or egg, and they pick one and hope for the best. And oftentimes it means they have one component, but they're not able to either have the credentials they issue verified, or they need credentials to be verified. So what we really see is organizations that are trying to boil the ocean, but then get lost or overwhelmed or blocked because they're trying to accomplish more than maybe the budget allows, or more than they and they just need to hit some KPIs, so they miss goals, for instance. So we see all kinds of blockers that come up, and oftentimes it's one or a couple blockers, and they just need additional support to overcome them. The other challenge has been with interoperability. What does interoperability mean? What are the claims of interoperability? How do you analyze the interoperability claims? And that has created a lot of either fear, uncertainty, and doubt, or misunderstandings between a vendor and their customer. And so a customer will say, well, they were interoperable. They said they were interoperable, and then they continue down the road, and then they hit a wall because maybe they weren't interoperable at the level that they needed them to be. Maybe it wasn't a signature, or maybe it was in a ledger or something, and they didn't understand in the beginning that interoperability is actually can be broken down to 7 different layers of interoperability. And that's where I think the open source community and working through the community to help clarify how we talk about the claims that we make about this technology has been very important for companies to continue to move forward with adoption, so that we're all speaking with the same language and understandings.
Interoperability is, some people like to talk about it, we like to do about it. The holding interop events where we actually test the different code against a reference implementation and then test the organizations against each other. It's not in a punitive type way, it's more to discover where are the specs ambiguous, how can we work to resolve that and improve the specifications, where are implementations off the rails, and can we pull them back together so that we can have different organizations truly be interoperable instead of theoretically interoperable. Another problem that I see is the next new shiny. The technology in the Hyperledger Indy Aries code bases is mature, highly privacy preserving and effective, and is deployable now. There are some new technologies that are emerging that we'd like to track, but I don't think that those are, if you get onto some of the emerging technologies before they mature out, you'll either run into performance or security vulnerabilities. It's good to vet them fully and then adopt them. We've worked with the community to take new technologies and bring them in as they mature and make sure that they are well implemented, scalable, tested, and then interoperable. But as I said, the current ones that are out there, the non-creds signature types, the protocols on DITCOM, the Aries profiles are highly functional and highly interoperable now. Build on that and then adopt the new stuff as it matures and bring it in. And that's another vulnerability that some organizations have that I like to try to steer them away from. Monitor the new stuff, help with the new stuff. When it's mature, adopt the new stuff. But in the meantime, operate on what's working now, be successful, and generate revenue and wider proliferation of the technology in the meantime.
So we have this problem with digital trust. Obviously, there's a ton of work being done on the solutions. Can you mentioned the need to sort of bridge the gap for companies that are looking to adopt these new technologies. Do you want to talk a little bit about the launch of Proven?
So I'm very excited about the launch of Proven because it gives all of the base components that need to be there for a company to adopt and deploy this. One of the key things that was missing was an ability to have a mobile agent that was open source. And so Indicio filled that gap and contributed the bifold agent into the Aries community so that there was a mobile agent. The mediator agent was pretty shaky and would fall over. So we worked on hardening that and improving its performance so it was reliable. We now have all of the reliable components that are there. One of the bits that's that we continue to work on is the integration of, for instance, an issuer agent with a current existing database, and having a technology that allows you to go get information about somebody, an employee, for instance, and issue that in a credential. Having a mechanism to tie that in and automate it is a kind of a key element that helps integrate the tech with existing technologies that are out in the wild today. Same thing on the verification side. There is a process where people verify stuff now. A lot of times it's manual, a lot of times it's digital with some significant flaws. But if you can integrate the technology into that process, the people part of the process, and the software part of the process, then you have an effective mechanism for getting adoption to occur more readily and overcome some of the trust issues that have been plaguing some of the companies.
I think it was last week, and I guess by the time this podcast's out, it'll be a couple of weeks. Um, but in the news, it looked like the digital identifiers standard, or DIDs, became a formal recommendation by the W3C. That's the international body that manages the standards that really power the internet. Um, can you give some context as to what that means, why it's a big deal? And we've also been reading that this came in spite of some pushback from big tech. So what's that all about?
There's a number of bits of that. The specifications for the DID being ratified is a huge step forward. I do think that this the specification allows for multiple DID methods to occur, so it has some flexibility for different organizations to specify different ways to have a decentralized identifier, or DID, be created and maintained and so forth. And the fact that it's made it through the arduous path to ratification through the W3C is a testament to its value, that there were enough people behind it pushing it to get it all the way through. The fact that large organizations or some small ones may object to new technologies is nothing new. Having them figure out and have enough time to react and come to a conclusion about how it might be appropriate to use. I've seen during my time with the W3C, I've observed at least one major company reverse course on being adamantly opposed to decentralized identifiers to now out in the market pushing their own solution. I think that will probably be the case with most of the large technical organizations as they see the value of it and the flexibility that it offers them and the compliance with regulations such as GDPR. I think it has a win for everybody in there. Will they all arrive at the exact same type of DID? Probably not. But Indicio and others are working to make all of the DIDs accessible. And within the Aries community, I know that there's been some effort to push the boundaries out and to be more inclusive in including other organizations and their different types of verifiable credentials to be included as well. That won't happen overnight. That is a slower process because it involves figuring out what other organizations have done and making sure that both tech stacks play well together. But interoperability is the name of the game. Indicio will continue to host interoperability events and push towards interoperability in the tech stacks. On the business side, there's also the need to have the organizations play well together. It behooves all of the organizations to arrive at interoperable solutions that gives them a broader base to draw upon.
Well, hopefully it's the type of progress that can help mitigate some of those misunderstandings around interoperability that Heather was talking about. Um, hey, it's been a fabulous and educational conversation. Do either of you have any final thoughts?
I think, like Ken said, the technology is available now to start building today. There's no need to wait. Everything is available open source or from a variety of companies in this space. Um, we've seen folks that have sat on the sidelines waiting and seeing, but there's no need to sit on the sidelines anymore. Now it's about who is building and who is moving to market, because we see commercial solutions being driven to market very quickly. And remember, it's always more than just the actual technology building. It's about how do we communicate that will help spur adoption by not only the businesses that are building, but their customers as well.
I think that as the world continues on its older path, you continue to see more security incidents. You see more pressure from regulatory bodies to push towards something to solve that problem. Verifiable credentials and DIDs are one of the answers to that set of problems. I think that you'll see broader and broader adoption, and it will continue to ramp up as in the short-term future.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for your time, and we'll see you all on the next one.
Great to be
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you.